Baby found a bear cub. Dragging himself, what happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning air felt different that day. Ruby Chen pressed her face against the cool kitchen window, watching her 18-month-old daughter Willow toddle around their backyard. The little girl moved with that wobbly determination only toddlers possessed, her chubby hands reaching for dandelions that dotted the grass like tiny suns. Ruby smiled as she stirred her coffee, but something made her pause. A sound drifted from the forest beyond their property line. Not the usual chirping of birds or rustling of leaves. This was different. Softer. Almost like crying. Willow heard it too. The little girl stopped her dandelion hunt and turned toward the thick line of pine trees that bordered their yard. Her tiny head tilted to one side, the way children do when they're trying to understand something new. Ruby set down her mug and stepped closer to the window. Their house sat on the edge of Pine Ridge, a small mountain town where wildlife encounters weren't uncommon. But this sound made her stomach twist with worry. The crying came again. Definitely not human, but heartbreaking in a way that made Ruby's chest tight. She watched as Willow took a few unsteady steps toward the fence that separated their yard from the wilderness. "No, baby," Ruby whispered, though she knew Willow couldn't hear her through the glass. But Willow kept walking, drawn by something Ruby couldn't see. The little girl's pink overalls caught the morning sunlight as she approached the wooden fence. She placed her small hands on the lowest rail and peered through the gap. That's when Ruby saw it. A small, dark shape was moving through the underbrush just beyond the fence. At first, Ruby thought it might be a large dog, but as the creature came closer, her breath caught in her throat. It was a bear cub, a tiny one, no bigger than a medium-sized dog, and it was dragging itself forward, one of its back legs trailing uselessly behind. Ruby's hands flew to her mouth. The cub was injured badly. Its dark fur was matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood. Each movement seemed to cause it pain, but still it kept crawling toward their fence. Toward Willow. The little girl was completely still now, her eyes wide as she watched the struggling animal. Ruby expected her daughter to cry or run away, but instead, Willow did something that made Ruby's heart stop. She started making soft cooing sounds, the same gentle noises she made when she pet their neighbor's cat. The bear cub heard her. It lifted its small head, and even from the window, Ruby could see its dark eyes lock onto Willow's face. For a moment, everything was perfectly quiet. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Then the cub made a sound that broke Ruby's heart, a small, pitiful whimper that sounded almost like a human baby crying for its mother. Willow's response was immediate. She began to climb the fence. "No!" Ruby dropped her coffee mug, not caring as it shattered on the kitchen floor. She ran for the back door, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. But she was too late. By the time she burst through the door, Willow had already squeezed through the fence slats. The toddler was sitting in the dirt just inches from the injured cub, her small hand extended toward the wild animal. Ruby froze. Every instinct screamed at her to rush forward and snatch her daughter away from danger. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way the cub was looking at Willow. Not with aggression or fear, but with something that looked almost like hope. The two babies, one human, one bear, stared at each other in the dappled morning light. Willow's hand was still reaching out, trembling slightly, as if she understood the importance of this moment. The cub's breathing was labored, and Ruby could see now that its injuries were worse than she'd first thought. There were scratch marks along its side, and its left hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, How long had it been suffering alone in the woods? Willow made another soft cooing sound, and the cub's ears perked up slightly. It tried to move closer to her, dragging itself another painful inch forward. That's when Ruby heard the other sound, the one that made her blood run cold. Heavy footsteps were crashing through the forest, getting closer. Something big was moving through the trees, heading straight for them. Ruby's mind raced. The mother bear, it had to be, and she was coming for her cub. "Willow," Ruby whispered, afraid to speak louder and startle either the cub or whatever was approaching. "Baby, come back to Mommy." But Willow wasn't listening. She was completely focused on the injured cub, her little face scrunched up in concentration as she tried to figure out how to help. The footsteps were getting closer. Ruby could hear branches snapping, leaves rustling. Whatever was out there was big, and it was moving fast. The bear cub seemed to sense it too. It lifted its head and made a small sound, almost like it was calling out, calling for help. Ruby's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. Should she call 911? Animal control? Her husband Marcus was at work 20 minutes away. There wasn't time. The crashing sound stopped suddenly. The forest went completely silent. Ruby held her breath, her eyes scanning the tree line. She could feel something watching them, something big and powerful and probably very, very angry. Willow chose that moment to finally touch the bear cub. Her tiny fingers brushed against its matted fur, and the little animal seemed to relax slightly. It closed its eyes and leaned into her touch, as if it had been waiting for this moment of comfort. The sight was so tender, so innocent, that Ruby felt tears spring to her eyes. Her daughter's pure heart didn't see a dangerous wild animal. She saw a baby in pain just like herself. But the moment of peace was shattered when the bushes 30 feet away began to move. Something was coming through the trees, something that made the ground shake with each step. Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the bushes part. She expected to see a massive mother bear charging toward them, claws extended, ready to protect her cub. But what emerged from the forest made her gasp in confusion. It was a man, a tall, weathered man in a green ranger uniform, moving carefully through the undergrowth. His face was lined with worry, and he carried what looked like a tranquilizer gun in his hands. When he saw the scene in front of him, Willow sitting peacefully next to the injured cub, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Don't move," he called out softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nobody move a muscle." Ruby's mind reeled. A park ranger? Here? Their property wasn't part of any state park. The nearest ranger station was 40 miles away. What was he doing in their woods? The ranger's eyes darted between Willow and the cub, then scanned the forest behind him. His face was pale, and Ruby could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. He looked terrified. "Ma'am," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic, "I need you to very slowly call your daughter back. We have a situation here that's much worse than it looks." Ruby's blood chilled. "What do you mean?" "What situation?" The ranger kept his tranquilizer gun raised, but he wasn't pointing it at the cub. He was aiming it at the forest, as if something else might emerge at any moment. "This cub," he said, never taking his eyes off the tree line, "it's not just injured, it's bait." The word hit Ruby like a physical blow. "Bait? What are you talking about?" Willow, oblivious to the tension around her, had begun humming a soft lullaby. The same song Ruby sang to her every night before bed. The injured cub's breathing seemed to slow, becoming more peaceful as the gentle melody filled the air. The ranger's jaw tightened. 3 days ago, we got reports of an unusual predator in these woods, something that's been hunting bear cubs specifically. We've found 4 already, all with the same injuries. Claw marks, broken legs, but here's the thing. They weren't killed, they were wounded and left as bait. Ruby felt sick. Bait for what? For the mothers. This thing, whatever it is, it injures the cubs just enough to keep them alive, then waits for the mother bears to come looking. When they do, he trailed off, but his expression said everything. The forest around them suddenly felt different. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was ominous. Ruby realized she couldn't hear any birds singing, no insects buzzing. Even the wind had stopped moving through the trees. "We need to get the child away from the cub," the ranger continued, "but we have to be careful. If we move too fast, we might trigger an attack." Ruby's mind raced. An attack from what? "You still haven't told me what this thing is." The ranger's radio crackled to life, making everyone jump. A voice came through, filled with static and urgency. "Jake, this is Base. Do you copy?" The ranger, Jake, pressed the radio button with one hand while keeping his gun trained on the forest with the other. "I copy, Base. I found the 5th cub. There's a civilian child in the area." "Jake, listen carefully. We just got word from the helicopter team. They spotted movement about 200 yards from your position. It's big, and it's heading your way fast." Ruby's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the fence post to steady herself. "We need to get Willow now." But before anyone could move, the bear cub made a sound that stopped them all cold. It wasn't the pitiful whimper from before. This was different. Urgent. Almost like a warning. The cub was looking past Willow, past Ruby, toward a section of forest they couldn't see from where they stood. Its small body was tense, every muscle coiled with fear. Jake cursed under his breath. "It's here!" Ruby couldn't see anything, but she could feel it. A presence in the woods that made her skin crawl. Something was watching them, studying them, deciding when to strike. Willow seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. She stopped humming and looked around with wide, confused eyes. Her small hand was still resting on the cub's back, and Ruby could see her daughter's lower lip beginning to tremble. "Mama," Willow called out, her voice small and frightened. The sound of her daughter's voice broke Ruby's paralysis. She didn't care about mysterious predators or park rangers or anything else. Her baby needed her. "I'm coming, sweetheart," Ruby said, stepping through the gap in the fence. "No," Jake hissed. "Don't move. If you startle it now." His words were cut off by a sound that made Ruby's blood freeze. It came from the forest, from everywhere and nowhere at once. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. But it wasn't the growl of a bear. Ruby had heard bear sounds before during camping trips with Marcus. This was something else entirely. Something that made every primitive instinct in her body scream danger. The bear cub whimpering grew more frantic. It tried to crawl away from where the sound had come from, but its injured leg made movement almost impossible. Willow, sensing the little animal's distress, wrapped her arms around it protectively. "It's okay, baby bear," she whispered in that serious way toddlers have when they're trying to be grown up. "Willow'll help you." Ruby's heart broke and soared at the same time. Her daughter's compassion in the face of danger was both beautiful and terrifying. Jake's radio crackled again. "All units, we have visual confirmation. The target is approximately 8 feet tall, moving on 2 legs. Repeat, it's bipedal. This is not a bear. 8 feet tall, moving on 2 legs. Ruby's mind couldn't process what that meant. What kind of creature walked upright and hunted bear cubs? The growling came again, closer this time, and with it came a smell that made Ruby gag. It was like rotting meat mixed with something wild and musky, the scent of a predator that hadn't bathed in months. Jake raised his tranquilizer gun higher. "Mrs. What's your name?" "Chen. Ruby Chen." "Mrs. Chen, I need you to listen very carefully. When I say go, you grab your daughter and run for your house. Don't look back, don't hesitate. Just run." Ruby nodded, her whole body shaking. She could see Willow about 10 feet away, still cradling the injured cub. The distance seemed like miles. The bushes to their left rustled. Not the gentle movement of wind through leaves, but the deliberate parting of branches by something large moving through them. Jake's finger tightened on the trigger. "Get ready," he whispered. But before Ruby could move, Willow did something that changed everything. She started singing again, but this time it wasn't the lullaby. It was a song Ruby had never heard before, with words that didn't sound like any language she knew. The effect was immediate and startling. The injured cub stopped whimpering. The ominous growling from the forest ceased. Even the horrible smell seemed to fade. Willow's voice, pure and clear, filled the silence with strange, beautiful music. Her eyes were closed, and she swayed slightly as she sang, as if the song was moving through her rather than coming from her. Jake lowered his gun slightly, his face filled with confusion. "What is she doing?" Ruby couldn't answer. She'd never heard her daughter sing anything like this before. The melody was haunting, ancient-sounding, like something that had existed long before human civilization. The forest around them began to change. Ruby could hear birds starting to sing again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying away the last traces of that terrible smell. But the most remarkable change was in the bear cub. As Willow sang, its breathing grew stronger, more steady. The glazed look of pain in its eyes began to clear. It even tried to lift its head higher, as if the song was giving it strength. Jake's radio buzzed. "Base to Ranger Mitchell. We've lost visual on the target. It just disappeared. The helicopter crew says it's like it vanished into thin air." Ruby stared at her daughter in amazement. Willow was still singing, completely lost in her mysterious song. Her small hands glowed with a soft, warm light that seemed to be flowing into the injured cub. "This isn't possible," Jake whispered, but his voice held wonder rather than disbelief. The cub's injured leg, which had been twisted and useless just moments before, began to straighten. Ruby watched in stunned silence as the animal's wound seemed to close before her eyes. Not completely. It was still injured, but enough that it could move without the terrible pain from before. Willow's song began to fade, her voice growing softer until it was barely a whisper. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked tired but happy. "Baby bear better now," she announced with satisfaction, patting the cub gently. The cub, indeed, looked much better. It was sitting up now, alert and curious. When it looked at Willow, Ruby could swear she saw gratitude in its dark eyes. Jake slowly lowered his tranquilizer gun completely. "In 20 years of wildlife management," he said quietly, "I have never seen anything like that." Ruby wanted to ask him what he thought had just happened, but before she could speak they heard a new sound from the forest. This time it was definitely a bear, but not the angry roar they'd been expecting. It was a series of soft huffing sounds, the kind mother bears make when calling to their cubs. The little cub's ears perked up immediately. It scrambled to its feet, all 4 feet now, and let out an excited chirp in response. "The mother," Jake said, "she's coming." But this time, nobody seemed afraid. The oppressive atmosphere that had gripped the forest was gone, replaced by something that felt almost magical. The air shimmered with possibility, as if the world had suddenly become a place where impossible things could happen. A large black bear emerged from the trees, moving slowly and cautiously. She was massive, probably close to 300 pounds, but her approach was gentle. When she saw her cub sitting next to Willow, she stopped and tilted her head, as if trying to understand what she was seeing. The cub bounded toward its mother as fast as its healing leg would allow. The reunion was touching to watch, the mother bear nuzzling her baby, checking it over for injuries, relief evident in every movement. But then, the mother bear did something that made Ruby's breath catch. She looked directly at Willow, holding the toddler's gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly and deliberately, she bowed her massive head. It was unmistakably a gesture of thanks. Willow giggled and waved at the bears. "Bye-bye, baby bear. Bye-bye, mama bear." The mother bear huffed softly in response, then gently guided her cub back toward the forest. As they disappeared into the trees, Ruby heard the cub's happy chirping fade into the distance. Jake stood in stunned silence for several minutes, staring at the spot where the bears had vanished. Finally, he turned to Ruby with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Mrs. Chen," he said slowly, "I think we need to talk." Ruby picked up Willow, holding her daughter close as they walked back toward the house. The toddler seemed completely unaffected by what had just happened, babbling happily about the nice baby bear and humming fragments of that strange, beautiful song. Jake followed them, his radio crackling with confused reports from other rangers and the helicopter crew. Ruby caught pieces of their conversations. Something about thermal readings going haywire, equipment malfunctioning, and a search that had suddenly gone cold. "The kitchen," Ruby said, gesturing toward the back door. "We can talk in there." As they entered the house, Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "I need to take this. It's my supervisor." He stepped onto the back porch to answer, leaving Ruby alone with Willow. She set her daughter down and watched as the little girl immediately went to her toy box, pulling out her stuffed animals and arranging them in a circle on the living room floor. Ruby's hand shook as she started a fresh pot of coffee, her mind racing. What had she just witnessed? How had Willow known that song? And where had that healing light come from? Through the window, she could see Jake pacing on the porch, his voice urgent but too quiet to make out words. His expression grew more troubled with each passing minute. Willow was playing quietly with her stuffed animals, but Ruby noticed something odd. Her daughter was humming again. Not the mysterious song from earlier, but her usual nursery rhymes. Yet somehow, the stuffed animals seemed more alive. The teddy bear's button eyes seemed to follow movements, and the stuffed rabbit's ears twitched occasionally. Ruby blinked hard, wondering if the stress was making her see things. But no, there it was again. The rabbit's ear definitely moved. "Willow, sweetheart," Ruby said carefully. "What are you playing?" "Making friends better," Willow replied without looking up. She picked up a stuffed elephant that had a torn ear and cradled it gently. As she hummed, Ruby watched in amazement as the tear began to mend itself. The fabric weaving back together like invisible hands were stitching it. Ruby's knees gave out, and she sank into a kitchen chair. This wasn't her imagination. Her 18-month-old daughter could somehow heal things with her voice. Jake's conversation outside was getting heated. Ruby heard him say, "No, sir, I'm not losing my mind. And you need to send Dr. Hendricks immediately. Dr. Hendricks." Ruby had never heard that name before, but something about the way Jake said it made her uneasy. Willow finished with the elephant and moved on to a stuffed dog that had lost some of its stuffing. As she sang to it, the toy began to plump up, filling out as if new stuffing was materializing inside it. The back door opened and Jake returned, his face pale and drawn. He pocketed his phone and looked at Ruby with an expression that mixed awe with something that looked like fear. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you some questions about your daughter's abilities. Ruby's protective instincts flared. What kind of questions? How long has she been able to do what she did out there? I don't know. I've never seen her do anything like that before. Ruby paused, thinking. Although, now that I think about it, she's always been unusually good with animals. Our neighbor's cat follows her everywhere, and birds land on her when we're at the park. I just thought she was naturally gentle. Jake nodded grimly. And the song she sang? Have you heard it before? Never. I don't even know what language it was in. Jake pulled out a small recording device. I captured some of it. My supervisor's having it analyzed by linguistics experts, but he hesitated. But what? But they're saying it doesn't match any known human language. The tonal patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Ruby felt a chill run down her spine. What are you suggesting? Before Jake could answer, his radio crackled to life again. This time, the voice was different, older, more authoritative. Ranger Mitchell, this is Dr. Hendricks. I'm en route to your location with a specialized team. Estimated arrival in 30 minutes. Maintain your position and keep the child calm. Jake exchanged the radio for his phone, typing rapidly. Ruby caught a glimpse of his screen and saw he was sending photos. Photos of Willow playing with her toys. You photographed my daughter? Ruby's voice was sharp with anger. Mrs. Chen, you need to understand. What happened out there today isn't just unusual, it's unprecedented. My department has protocols for situations like this. Situations like what exactly? Jake looked uncomfortable. Children with extraordinary abilities. The words hung in the air like a threat. Ruby stood up, her maternal instincts in full alert mode. I think you should leave. I'm afraid I can't do that. Dr. Hendricks needs to examine your daughter. Examine her? She's not sick. She's perfectly normal. Jake gestured toward the living room, where Willow had moved on to a stuffed giraffe. As they watched, the toy's faded yellow color began to brighten, becoming vibrant and new-looking under her touch. Mrs. Chen, with all due respect, that is not normal. Ruby's phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you both. She stared at the message, torn between relief that her husband wasn't here to see this chaos and desperation to have him by her side. Marcus was logical, practical. He'd know what to do. I want to call my husband, Ruby said. I'm sorry, but I can't allow any outside communication until Dr. Hendricks arrives. Ruby's blood ran cold. Are you arresting us? No, ma'am, but this situation has been classified as a matter of national security. National security? Ruby's mind reeled. How had a sweet moment between her daughter and an injured animal turned into something involving government officials? Willow, oblivious to the tension around her, had finished with her stuffed animals and was now looking around for something else to fix. Her gaze settled on an old family photo that sat on the coffee table, a picture of Ruby's grandmother that had been damaged in a move years ago, with a long crack running across the glass. "Uh-oh, picture hurt," Willow said, reaching for it. "No, sweetheart, don't touch." Ruby started forward, but she was too late. Willow picked up the frame and began humming softly. The crack in the glass started to fade, the fractured lines slowly disappearing as if they'd never existed. But something else happened, too. The photograph itself began to change. Ruby's grandmother, who had been alone in the original picture, was suddenly not alone anymore. A figure was materializing beside her, translucent at first, then becoming more solid. Ruby gasped. The figure was a woman she'd never seen before, but there was something familiar about her face. She had the same dark eyes as Willow, the same delicate bone structure. Jake cursed under his breath and started taking more photos with his phone. "Stop," Ruby said, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. She was transfixed by the changing photograph. The mysterious woman in the picture was wearing clothes from a different era, maybe the 1920s or 1930s. She had her hand on Ruby's grandmother's shoulder, and both women were smiling. But here's what made Ruby's heart stop. The mysterious woman was holding a baby with dark hair and eyes that looked exactly like Willow. Willow finished her humming and set the photo down carefully. "Pretty ladies," she said with satisfaction. Ruby picked up the frame with trembling hands. The glass was perfectly clear now, but the photograph showed something impossible. It showed 4 generations of women from her family, including one she'd never known existed and a baby that looked identical to her daughter. "This isn't possible," Ruby whispered. Jake was on his radio again, his voice urgent. "Dr. Hendricks, you need to get here faster. The situation is escalating." Ruby studied the photograph more closely. There was writing on the back that she'd never noticed before, probably because the old adhesive had kept it stuck to the frame. Now she could peel it away and read the faded ink. "Elena, Rose, and Little Moonsinger. 1934, Moonsinger." Ruby's heart pounded. Her grandmother's name was Rose, but who was Elena? And why was the baby called Moonsinger? "Mrs. Chen," Jake said carefully, "I need you to put the photograph down and step away from your daughter." Ruby looked up, confused by the fear in his voice. That's when she noticed that Willow was glowing again. Not just her hands this time, but her entire body was surrounded by a soft, silvery light. The toddler didn't seem aware of it. She was examining a wilted plant on the windowsill, reaching up on her tiptoes to touch its brown leaves. "Flower sick," Willow announced. The moment her fingers touched the plant, it burst back to life. Green spread through the stems like wildfire, and within seconds, bright yellow blooms erupted from branches that had been dead moments before. But the transformation didn't stop there. Other plants around the house began to respond. Ruby watched in amazement as her usually struggling houseplant suddenly flourished. Leaves unfurled, stems straightened, and flowers bloomed in a cascade of color that filled the room with the scent of spring. Jake backed toward the door, his hand moving to something on his belt that Ruby realized was not just a radio, but some kind of monitoring device. It was beeping rapidly, the sound growing more urgent by the second. "Dr. Hendricks," he spoke into his radio. "We have a major energy spike. The readings are off the charts." Through the front window, Ruby could see vehicles approaching. Black SUVs with tinted windows, moving fast up their quiet street. "Who are those people?" Ruby demanded. "Specialists," Jake said grimly. "People who deal with cases like this." "Cases like what?" "My daughter isn't a case, she's a little girl." But even as Ruby said it, she knew everything had changed. Willow stood in the center of the room, surrounded by blooming plants and restored toys, humming a song that belonged to no earthly culture. The photograph in Ruby's hands showed impossible things, and somewhere in the forest, a mysterious predator had vanished at the sound of her daughter's voice. The first SUV pulled into their driveway. Ruby could see figures in dark suits getting out, carrying cases that looked like high-tech equipment. "Mama!" Willow looked up at Ruby with innocent eyes. "More people come play?" Ruby's heart broke. Her daughter had no idea that her gift, whatever it was, had just changed their lives forever. Jake's monitoring device was beeping so fast now it sounded like a continuous alarm. "Mrs. Chen, I need you and your daughter to remain calm. Dr. Hendricks is here to help." The front door opened without anyone knocking. A woman in her 50s entered, followed by a team of people carrying sophisticated equipment. She had silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp blue eyes that immediately fixed on Willow. "I'm Dr. Sarah Hendricks," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "And you, little one, are quite extraordinary." Willow smiled shyly and hid behind Ruby's legs. Dr. Hendricks nodded to her team, and they began setting up equipment around the room. Cameras, sensors, devices that hummed with electronic energy. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand that your daughter is exhibiting abilities that we've only theorized about until now. She appears to be what we call a resonance child, someone who can tap into and manipulate the fundamental frequencies that connect all living things." Ruby pulled Willow closer. "I don't care what you call her. She's my daughter, and I want you to leave." Dr. Hendricks smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, your daughter isn't just special. She's potentially the most important discovery in human history." One of the technicians looked up from his equipment. "Dr. Hendricks, the resonance patterns are unlike anything we've recorded before. The harmonic frequencies are creating interference with our instruments." "Fascinating," Dr. Hendricks murmured, making notes on a tablet. "And the healing properties?" "Confirmed. We're detecting cellular regeneration in all organic matter within a 15-foot radius of the subject." Subject. They were calling Willow a subject. Ruby's hands clenched into fists. "Stop talking about her like she's a laboratory experiment. Mrs. Chen, I understand this is difficult, but your daughter represents an evolutionary leap. The songs she sings, the healing she performs, this could revolutionize medicine, psychology, even our understanding of consciousness itself." Dr. Hendricks approached Willow slowly, the way one might approach a wild animal. "Hello, sweetheart. Can you sing your pretty song for us?" Willow shook her head and pressed closer to Ruby. The silver glow around her began to dim. "She's scared," Ruby said. "You're scaring her with all this equipment." "The child's emotional state directly affects her abilities," one of the technicians reported. "Fear and stress seem to dampen the resonance field." Dr. Hendricks frowned. "We need to establish trust. Mrs. Chen, your cooperation would be invaluable." "My cooperation with what?" "We'd like to take Willow to our research facility for a comprehensive study, just for a few days." Ruby's world tilted. "Absolutely not. You're not taking my daughter anywhere." "Mrs. Chen, I'm not asking. This situation is far beyond local or even state jurisdiction now. Your daughter's abilities represent a potential threat to national security if they fall into the wrong hands." "She's 18 months old. She's not a threat to anyone." Dr. Hendricks gestured to the blooming plants around the room. "She just demonstrated the ability to accelerate biological processes at will. In the wrong circumstances, that same power could be used to cause rapid decay, disease, even death." Ruby felt the blood drain from her face. "Willow would never hurt anyone." "Not intentionally, no, but what happens when she gets angry? What happens during a tantrum? Most toddlers scream and throw toys. Your daughter could theoretically devastate entire ecosystems." The room fell silent, except for the humming of electronic equipment. Ruby looked down at Willow, who was playing with the hem of her shirt, completely unaware of the conversation happening around her. Could her sweet, gentle daughter really be dangerous? As if sensing her mother's distress, Willow looked up and reached for Ruby's face. "Mama sad?" The moment Willow's small hand touched Ruby's cheek, a wave of peace washed over her. The fear, the confusion, the overwhelming stress of the morning, it all faded away, replaced by a profound sense of calm and love. Dr. Hendricks was watching intently, her equipment beeping with new readings. "Emotional manipulation," she murmured to one of her assistants. "She's not just healing physical ailments, she's affecting neurochemistry." Ruby jerked away from Willow's touch, suddenly afraid. Had her daughter just controlled her emotions? The hurt look on Willow's face was heartbreaking. "Mama, no sad?" I'm not sad, baby," Ruby managed, but her voice was shaky. Dr. Hendricks made more notes. "The child doesn't seem to understand the extent of her abilities. She's acting on pure instinct." Jake stepped forward. "Doctor Hendricks, there's something else." The creature in the forest. It disappeared the moment the child started singing. Our thermal imaging went dark, our tracking equipment malfunctioned. It was like she created some kind of interference field. Or, Dr. Hendricks said thoughtfully, she sent it away. The question is, where did it go, and will it come back? Before anyone could respond, Ruby's phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's work number, and she lunged for it despite Jake's protest. "Marcus, thank God." "Ruby?" Her husband's voice sounded strange, distant. "Ruby, something weird is happening at the office. All the electronics just went haywire about 20 minutes ago. Computers crashed, phones stopped working, even the coffee machines are acting up. And Ruby, there are animals outside." Ruby's blood chilled. "What kind of animals?" "All kinds. Deer, rabbits, even a few bears. They're just standing in the parking lot, looking up at our building. It's like they're waiting for something." Dr. Hendricks was listening intently, her expression growing more concerned. She gestured to one of her technicians, who immediately began typing on a tablet. "Marcus, I need you to come home right now," Ruby said. "I'm trying, but my car won't start. None of the cars will start. Ruby, what's going on?" "The animals, they all started showing up right after. I felt this weird sensation, like someone was calling to me. It was the strangest thing. For just a moment I could swear I heard Willow singing." Ruby looked at her daughter, who was now sitting quietly on the floor, seemingly absorbed in examining her own hands. But there was something different about the way the light fell around her, as if reality bent slightly in her presence. "Mrs. Chen," Dr. Hendricks said urgently, "I need you to hang up that phone. Your daughter's abilities are clearly expanding beyond our initial assessment." "Marcus, listen to me," Ruby said quickly. "Something's happened. There are people here who say they're from the government. They want to take Willow for testing." "What?" "Ruby, get out of there. Take Willow and—" The phone went dead. Ruby looked at the screen. No signal bars at all. "I'm sorry," Dr. Hendricks said, not sounding sorry at all. "We've activated a communication blackout in this area, for security purposes." "You can't do that," Ruby shouted. One of the technicians looked up from his equipment. "Dr. Hendricks, we're getting massive energy readings from multiple locations across the city. It's like the child's resonance field is activating dormant nodes." "Nodes?" Ruby demanded. "What nodes?" Dr. Hendricks hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Mrs. Chen, your daughter, isn't the first of her kind. Throughout history, there have been isolated cases of children born with similar abilities. We call them resonance children, and they appear roughly once every 100 years. She gestured to one of her assistants, who pulled up a holographic display from a small projector. Images appeared in the air, old photographs, paintings, historical documents. "This is Elena Vasquez, born in 1890 in New Mexico. Local legends say she could communicate with spirits and heal with her voice. She disappeared at age 5. The image shifted. "Thomas Brightwater, born in Wales in 1823. Witnesses claimed he could make crops grow with his songs and calm wild animals. He also vanished as a child. Ruby stared at the images, her heart sinking. They all disappeared? Not disappeared, taken, by us, or rather by the organizations that came before us. You see, Mrs. Chen, resonance children are incredibly powerful, but they're also incredibly unstable. Without proper training and containment, their abilities can spiral out of control. Containment. Ruby's voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Hendricks nodded grimly. The last known resonance child was identified in 1934. A little girl named, well, we only knew her by her nickname, Moonsinger. Ruby's legs nearly gave out. The photograph, the woman with her grandmother, the baby that looked like Willow. That was my great-grandmother, Ruby whispered. Dr. Hendricks blinked in surprise. Impossible. Moonsinger was taken into custody in 1934. She died at our facility 2 years later during a containment breach. No. Ruby pulled out the restored photograph, showing it to Dr. Hendricks. This was taken after 1934. That's my grandmother, Rose. And this is Elena, my great-grandmother. She didn't die in your facility. Dr. Hendricks studied the photograph, her face pale. This is impossible. Our records clearly show. She was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, Ruby could see more animals arriving. Not just forest creatures now, but pets from around the neighborhood. Dogs, cats, even a few horses from the farm down the road. They were all gathering in Ruby's front yard, sitting quietly, all facing the house. The resonance field is expanding, one of the technicians reported, his voice tight with worry. We're picking up harmonic frequencies from a 12-mile radius now. Willow looked up from her hands and gazed out the window. When she saw all the animals, her face lit up with delight. "Friends," she exclaimed, clapping her hands. The moment she clapped, every piece of electronic equipment in the room went dead. The lights flickered and went out. Even the battery-powered devices stopped working. In the sudden silence, they could hear something else. Singing. Not from Willow, but from outside. It started as a soft humming, then grew into a melody that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Dr. Hendricks grabbed a manual instrument from her kit, an old-fashioned compass, that spun wildly before pointing directly at Willow. "This is unprecedented," she whispered. "The child is creating a resonance cascade. She's awakening every dormant frequency in the area." Ruby moved to the window and gasped. The animals in the yard weren't just sitting anymore. They were glowing with the same soft, silvery light that surrounded Willow. And they were all looking up at the sky, as if waiting for something to descend from above. "What are they waiting for?" Jake asked. His question was answered by a sound that made everyone freeze. It came from high above, a melodic calling that seemed to harmonize perfectly with the singing from the animals below. Ruby looked up and saw something that defied explanation. Shapes were moving through the clouds, but they weren't birds or aircraft. They were translucent, shifting forms that pulsed with the same silvery light. As they descended, Ruby could make out more detail. They looked like people, but people made of light and air, with long flowing hair that moved like water, and eyes that held the depth of starlight. "Air spirits," Dr. Hendricks breathed. "Dear God, she's calling the air spirits." One of the luminous beings descended faster than the others, landing gracefully in the yard among the gathered animals. It was clearly female, with features that seemed both ancient and ageless. When she looked toward the house, Ruby felt a jolt of recognition. It was Elena, her great-grandmother. But not as she had been in life. This was Elena as she truly was, a being of pure energy and song. Willow pressed her face against the window and waved excitedly. "Grandmama Elena." the spirit. Elena smiled and began walking toward the house. With each step, flowers bloomed in the grass beneath her feet. The animals parted respectfully, but they didn't seem afraid. If anything, they looked peaceful, as if her presence brought them comfort. Dr. Hendricks was frantically trying to restart her equipment. We need to document this. This is the most significant paranormal event in recorded history. But Ruby wasn't thinking about documentation or science. She was thinking about the implications. If Elena was alive, or whatever this was, then the government's records were wrong. They hadn't successfully contained the last resonance child after all. Elena reached the front door and simply walked through it, her luminous form passing through the wood as if it were air. She stood in the living room, radiating warmth and an indescribable sense of home. When she spoke, her voice was like wind chimes and flowing water. "Hello, little moon singer. I've been waiting so long to meet you." Willow toddled toward Elena without fear, her arms outstretched. When she reached the spirit, Elena knelt down and embraced her, and for a moment, both of them blazed with brilliant light. "You're in danger, little one," Elena said, her eyes shifting to Dr. Hendricks and her team. "These people want to cage your song, to turn your gift into a weapon." Dr. Hendricks stepped forward. "That's not true. We want to help her control her abilities." Elena's expression hardened. "The way you helped me, the way you helped all the others, you died in 1936. Our records, your records lie." Elena stood, still holding Willow. "I escaped. I spent my life learning to control my gift without your cages and your experiments, and I've been waiting for the next one to be born." She looked at Ruby with eyes full of compassion. "Your bloodline carries the song, child. It skips generations, waiting for the right soul to carry it forward. Willow is not just a resonance child, she's the strongest one ever born." One of Dr. Hendricks' technicians managed to get a tablet working and was furiously taking notes. "Dr. Hendricks, the energy readings are beyond our measurement capabilities. This entity is generating frequencies we've never seen before." Elena noticed the tablet and frowned. With a gesture, it crumbled to dust in the technician's hands. "No more measurements," she said firmly. "No more cages. This child will be free to discover her gift naturally." Dr. Hendricks pulled out what looked like a tranquilizer gun. "I'm sorry, but I can't allow this. The child is too dangerous to remain uncontained." Before she could fire, every animal in the yard burst through the window simultaneously. But they didn't break the glass, they simply passed through it the way Elena had passed through the door. The living room filled with deer, rabbits, bears, household pets, and creatures Ruby had never seen before. They formed a protective circle around Elena and Willow, their eyes glowing with that same silvery light. The largest bear, a massive grizzly that must have weighed 800 pounds, stood directly in front of Dr. Hendricks. But it didn't growl or threaten. It simply looked at her with eyes that held ancient wisdom and made a soft huffing sound that somehow conveyed a clear message. "You will not harm the child." "This is impossible," Jake whispered. "Animals don't behave this way." Elena smiled. "They do when they're free to be what they truly are. All living things are connected by the same song, Ranger Mitchell. Your science knows this. You call it quantum entanglement, electromagnetic fields, consciousness, but you've forgotten that it can be felt, heard, and sung." She turned to Ruby. "Your daughter will have to choose soon. She can go with these people and learn to suppress her gift, to use it as they see fit, or she can come with me and learn the true song that connects all things." Ruby's heart was breaking. "You're asking me to give up my daughter." I'm asking you to set her free, as your great-grandmother was set free." Elena gestured toward the photograph that still lay on the coffee table. As they watched, the image began to move like a window into the past. They could see Elena and Rose playing in a garden, laughing as flowers bloomed around them. They could see Elena teaching, the baby, the original moon singer, to hum melodies that made butterflies dance. "This is what her life could be," Elena said. "Wonder, discovery, harmony with all living things, or ... She gestured toward Dr. Hendricks and her equipment. "A life in laboratories, being studied and tested until her spirit breaks." Willow, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly began to sing again. But this time, her song was different, sadder. It was the melody of a child who sensed she was at the center of something bigger than herself. As she sang, Ruby began to understand the music. Not the words, there were no words, but the meaning behind it. Willow was asking a question: where do I belong? The answer came not from Elena or Dr. Hendricks, but from Ruby's own heart. Her daughter belonged wherever she could be safe, loved, and free to be herself. But which choice would give her that? Dr. Hendricks seemed to sense Ruby's wavering. "Mrs. Chen, think about what you're considering. This entity wants to take your daughter away from everything she knows. At our facility, she'd still be with you. You could visit, be part of her training." Elena's laugh was like silver bells, but there was sadness in it. "Visits, training, schedules, and protocols. Is that what you want for her, Ruby?" Before Ruby could answer, Willow made the choice for her. The toddler wiggled out of Elena's arms and walked to her mother. She placed her small hands on Ruby's face and began to hum softly. Suddenly, Ruby could see everything. She saw the government facility doctor. Hendricks represented. Sterile rooms, observation windows. Children who had forgotten how to laugh. She saw Elena's world, forests filled with singing. Creatures that danced to melodies older than human civilization. Knowledge that spanned dimensions. But she also saw a third option. A narrow path between the two extremes, where Willow could grow up knowing both worlds without being trapped in either. "There's another way," Ruby said slowly. Elena tilted her head, curious. Dr. Hendricks frowned, suspicious. "Willow stays with me," Ruby continued, "but Elena teaches her about her gift, and Dr. Hendricks ... She looked at the scientist. "You study what she's willing to share, but only what she's willing to share. No containment, no experiments, just observation and protection." Dr. Hendricks shook her head. "Impossible. The security risk..." "The security risk," Elena interrupted, "comes from trying to cage something that was meant to be free. Help her grow into her power naturally, and she'll never be a threat. Try to control her, and you'll create the very monster you fear." Jake stepped forward. "What about the creature in the forest? The thing that was hunting the bear cubs?" Elena's expression darkened. "That was sent by others who know what Willow is. They want to capture her before you do. The song she sang this morning didn't just heal the cub, it announced her presence to every sensitive being within 1,000 miles. "Others?" Dr. Hendricks demanded. "What others? Did you think your government was the only one interested in children like Willow? There are organizations far older and far less ethical than yours." Elena's form flickered, becoming more translucent. "I can't stay much longer. The energy required to manifest physically is enormous, but Willow will need protection from those who are coming." As if summoned by her words, the animals in the yard began to stir restlessly. The bears lifted their heads, sniffing the air. The birds took flight. circling the house in agitated patterns. "They're coming now," Elena whispered. "The collectors." In the distance, Ruby could hear the sound of vehicles approaching. Not the organized rumble of government convoys, but something else. Engines that sounded wrong, like they were powered by something other than gasoline. Elena's form was fading rapidly. "Remember, Ruby, the choice is always hers. Never let them make her forget that." With those words, Elena vanished, leaving only the faint scent of wildflowers in the air. Dr. Hendricks immediately began barking orders into her radio. "All units, we have incoming unknowns. Establish a perimeter around the house. Priority is protecting the child." Jake was at the window, his weapon drawn. "These vehicles, I've never seen anything like them." Ruby looked out and felt her blood freeze. 3 dark shapes were moving up their street, but they weren't quite cars. They seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, their surfaces reflecting images that weren't there, glimpses of other places, other times. "What are those things?" Ruby breathed. Dr. Hendricks' face was grim. "Elena was right. The collectors. We've heard rumors about them for decades, but we've never encountered them directly." "Who are they?" "People who collect beings like your daughter. Not for study or protection, but for—" Dr. Hendricks paused. "For purposes we don't fully understand. What we do know is that children who disappear with them are never seen again." The vehicles stopped at the end of Ruby's driveway. Figures began emerging from them. Tall, thin beings dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were hidden behind masks that looked like they were made of polished obsidian. Willow, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, suddenly let out a sound Ruby had never heard before. It wasn't crying or screaming. It was pure terror, vocalized in a way that made every living thing in the house freeze. The protective animals immediately moved closer to her, forming tighter circles. The bears positioned themselves at the windows, while smaller creatures surrounded Willow directly. One of the masked figures raised what looked like a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with dark energy. When it pointed the staff at the house, all the animals began to back away, whimpering. "They're using some kind of frequency weapon," Dr. Hendricks said, her scientific training overriding her fear. "It's disrupting the animals' protective instincts." Ruby scooped up Willow, who was now crying in earnest. The moment mother and daughter were in contact, the dark crystal's power seemed to weaken. The animals stopped retreating. "The connection between you and your daughter," Dr. Hendricks realized. "It's creating interference with their technology." Jake was on his radio, calling for backup, but only static answered him. "They're jamming our communications." The masked figures began walking toward the house with slow, deliberate steps. With each step they took, the grass beneath their feet withered and died. "We need to get out of here," Ruby said. "Where can we go?" Jake asked. "They'll follow the child's energy signature anywhere." Dr. Hendricks was rapidly assembling something from her equipment case, a device that looked like a portable shield generator. "This might buy us some time, but it won't hold them for long." As the collectors reached the front porch, Willow's crying intensified, but mixed with her tears was something else. Fragments of that ancient song Elena had taught her. And in the distance Ruby could hear an answering call. Not from the sky this time, but from the forest. Deep, powerful voices raised in harmony with Willow's frightened song. The mother bear and her cub hadn't gone far after all, and they were bringing friends. The sound that emerged from the forest was unlike anything Ruby had ever heard. It started as a low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself, then rose into a harmony of growls, howls, and calls that made the windows vibrate. Every wild creature within miles was answering Willow's frightened song. The masked collectors paused at the front steps, their obsidian faces turning toward the forest. For the first time since their arrival, they seemed uncertain. Dr. Hendricks activated her shield device, and a shimmering barrier appeared around the house. "This will hold them for maybe 10 minutes," she said grimly. But the collectors weren't trying to breach the barrier yet. They were regrouping, their crystal-topped staffs now glowing brighter as they pointed them toward the approaching forest sounds. "They're preparing for something big," Jake muttered, checking his weapon. "What do those staffs actually do?" Before Dr. Hendricks could answer, the first wave of forest creatures burst from the tree line. But these weren't the gentle, glowing animals that had gathered earlier. These were wild things in their full power. Massive bears, wolves with eyes like silver fire, elk with antlers that seemed to crackle with electricity. Leading them was the mother bear from that morning, but she had changed. She was larger now, her fur rippling with the same silvery energy that surrounded Willow. When she roared, it wasn't just a bear's challenge. It was a battle cry that spoke of ancient alliances between the wild and the innocent. The collectors raised their staffs, and dark energy lanced out toward the charging animals. Where the beams struck, creatures stumbled and fell, their silver glow flickering and dying. "They're draining their life force," Dr. Hendricks breathed in horror. Ruby clutched Willow tighter. Her daughter had stopped crying and was now watching the battle through the window with an expression far too serious for an 18-month-old child. "Stop hurting friends," Willow said quietly. The moment she spoke, every fallen animal began to glow brighter. The dark energy from the collector's staff suddenly reversed direction, flowing back into the crystals and overloading them. 3 of the staffs exploded in showers of sparks, and their wielders staggered backward. But more collectors were emerging from their vehicles. Ruby counted at least a dozen now, and they were carrying different weapons, nets that seemed to be woven from shadow, and strange helmets that covered their entire heads. "We need to move, Doctor," Hendricks said urgently. "My shield won't hold against that many." Jake was already moving toward the back door. "There's a service road behind the house. If we can reach the forest—" He was cut off by a new sound, the roar of helicopters approaching fast. Ruby looked up to see military aircraft circling overhead, their searchlights cutting through the afternoon sky. "Are those yours?" Ruby asked Dr. Hendricks. The scientist shook her head grimly. "Those markings, I don't recognize them." The helicopters began landing in the fields around Ruby's house, disgorging more figures in dark uniforms. But these weren't like the collectors. They moved with military precision, carrying conventional weapons and wearing tactical gear that looked advanced but recognizably human. "A third faction," Dr. Hendricks muttered. "This is turning into a war zone." Through the chaos outside, Ruby heard a familiar voice shouting her name. She looked out the side window and gasped. Marcus was running across the field, followed by a group of people she didn't recognize. But there was something strange about the way he was moving. Too fast, too fluid, like he was being carried by invisible hands. "That's impossible," Ruby whispered. "He was 40 minutes away." As Marcus got closer, Ruby could see why he was moving so strangely. He was surrounded by a faint shimmer of the same energy that surrounded Willow. Somehow, his connection to his daughter was allowing him to tap into her power. "Ruby," Marcus called out as he reached the house. "I came as fast as I could. The whole city is going crazy. Animals everywhere, electronics failing, and people are saying they can hear singing in their heads." The people following Marcus weren't strangers after all. Ruby recognized Mrs. Patterson from down the street, the Henderson family from 3 houses over, and at least 6 other neighbors. They all had the same faint shimmer around them. How are they all connected to Willow? Dr. Hendricks demanded. Because they love her, Ruby realized. Everyone who's ever been kind to her, everyone who's formed an emotional bond, she's inadvertently linked to them. Willow saw her father through the window and let out a joyful squeal. Daddy! The moment she spoke, Marcus's glow intensified, and he moved even faster. But so did the neighbors behind him. Mrs. Patterson, who was 78 years old, was keeping pace with people half her age. The collectors noticed the approaching group and turned some of their attention away from the animals. Ruby watched in horror as they raised their remaining staffs toward Marcus and the neighbors. "No!" she shouted, even though they couldn't hear her through the barrier. But Willow heard her. The toddler pressed her hands against the window and began humming urgently. The sound was different this time. Not the healing melody or the ancient song Elena had recognized. This was pure protection, a mother's lullaby transformed into a shield. The dark energy from the collector's staffs hit an invisible wall 10 feet from Marcus and the neighbors. The beams scattered harmlessly, some deflecting back toward the collectors themselves. "She's learning to control it," Dr. Hendricks said in amazement. "Without any training, she's instinctively developing defensive capabilities." Jake's radio suddenly crackled to life. A voice came through, clear and authoritative. "This is Colonel Sarah Morrison, United States Paranormal Defense Division. All hostile forces are ordered to stand down immediately." Dr. Hendricks grabbed the radio. "Colonel Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Hendricks, Research Division. We have a Priority Alpha situation here." "Dr. Hendricks, maintain your position. We're establishing a secure perimeter. Do not let the child fall into collector hands under any circumstances." "There's a Paranormal Defense Division?" Ruby asked. "Classified until about 30 minutes ago," Dr. Hendricks replied grimly. "The President authorized its disclosure when satellite imagery showed what was happening here." Through the window, Ruby could see the military forces from the helicopters engaging the collectors. But this wasn't a conventional battle. The soldiers were using weapons that fired beams of pure white light, and their armor seemed to be specially designed to resist the collectors' dark energy. The forest animals had regrouped and were now working alongside the military forces. Ruby watched in amazement as the mother bear stood back to back with a soldier, both of them facing down a group of collectors. But the strangest sight was her neighbors. Led by Marcus, they had formed a protective circle around the house, holding hands and humming. Ruby could barely hear them through the barrier, but their melody was harmonizing perfectly with Willow's protective song. "It's like they're all becoming part of her," Dr. Hendricks observed. "The emotional connections are creating a resonance network." Willow turned away from the window and looked directly at Dr. Hendricks. When she spoke, her voice was clearer than Ruby had ever heard it, as if the chaos outside was helping her find her words. "Bad people want to take Willow away from Mama and Daddy," she said simply. Dr. Hendricks knelt down to Willow's level. "Yes, sweetheart, but we won't let them. Dr. Hendricks want to take Willow away too." The blunt honesty of the statement hit like a physical blow. Dr. Hendricks opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. "Not take away," she said finally. "Just keep safe." Willow tilted her head, studying the scientist with those impossibly deep, dark eyes. Safe like Elena was safe? The question hung in the air. Dr. Hendricks looked away, unable to meet the child's gaze. Outside, the battle was intensifying. More helicopters were arriving, but Ruby could see that some of them bore different markings. The conflict was spreading beyond just 3 factions. How many different groups know about children like Willow? Ruby asked. Dr. Hendricks stood slowly, her face troubled. More than we realized, apparently. The collectors are international, but they're just the most aggressive. There are research organizations, government divisions, private corporations, even religious groups that believe resonance children are either angels or demons. And they're all coming here? Word travels fast in our community. When a child this powerful manifests, everyone wants a piece of the discovery. Ruby felt overwhelmed. How had her quiet morning with her daughter turned into an international incident? The answer came from an unexpected source. Jake, who had been monitoring radio chatter, looked up with a pale face. "Mrs. Chen, I think you need to hear this. We're picking up communications from multiple agencies. The energy signature from your daughter's abilities this morning was detected by satellites, radio telescopes, even deep space monitoring stations." What does that mean? It means her song didn't just reach animals and people on Earth, it reached other places. As if summoned by his words, a new sound began to echo across the battlefield. It came from above, but not from any aircraft. It was a singing, pure and ethereal, that seemed to come from the sky itself. Everyone, soldiers, collectors, neighbors, animals, stopped fighting and looked up. The clouds were beginning to swirl in patterns that defied meteorology. Colors that had no names danced through the vapor, and shapes moved within them that might have been beings or might have been dreams. "First contact," Dr. Hendricks whispered. "Dear God, we're witnessing first contact." Willow clapped her hands in delight. More friends. But Ruby wasn't sure these new arrivals were friends at all. The singing from above had an alien quality that made her skin crawl. Whatever was up there was powerful beyond imagining, and it was responding to her daughter's call. The collectors seemed to recognize the danger. They began retreating toward their vehicles, but their movements were frantic now, desperate. Colonel Morrison's voice came over the radio again. "All units, we have unidentified aerial phenomena. Maintain defensive positions, but do not engage unless fired upon." Marcus and the neighbors were still humming their protective circle, but Ruby could see the strain on their faces. Maintaining the connection to Willow was exhausting them. "We need to end this," Ruby said, "before someone gets hurt." "How?" Jake asked. "Your daughter is the epicenter of everything happening here." Ruby looked at Willow, who was still watching the swirling clouds with fascination. Her little girl had somehow become the most important person on Earth in the span of a single morning. "Willow," Ruby said gently, "can you ask your friends to stop fighting?" The toddler nodded seriously and walked to the center of the room. She took a deep breath and began to sing again, but this time her song was different from all the others. It was a song of peace, of understanding, of the connections that bound all living things together, regardless of where they came from or what they wanted. The effect was immediate and profound. The fighting outside stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. Soldiers lowered their weapons. The remaining collectors ceased their retreat and stood motionless. Even the swirling clouds above began to calm. In the sudden silence, Willow's song continued, weaving through the air like visible light. Ruby could see it now, threads of silver energy connecting her daughter to every living thing in sight. The humans, the animals, even the beings in the clouds above. She's not just singing to them, Dr. Hendricks realized. She's singing for them. She's becoming a translator between different forms of consciousness. One of the beings from the clouds began to descend. It was unlike anything Ruby had ever imagined, a form of living music that took shape as it approached. When it finally solidified enough to be seen clearly, it appeared as a tall, graceful figure made of crystallized sound waves. When it spoke, its voice harmonized perfectly with Willow's song. We heard the call of a new song weaver. We came to welcome her to the greater symphony. Song weaver? Dr. Hendricks stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. One who can hear the music that connects all consciousness across all dimensions. Your species has produced only a few throughout your history. This child may be the strongest yet born. The being gestured toward Willow, who was still singing but now looking at their visitor with bright curiosity. She must choose her path carefully. Many will try to use her gift for their own purposes, but the song belongs to no one and everyone. Dr. Hendricks pulled out a recording device. Can you tell us more about these abilities? How they work? How they can be controlled? The crystalline being made a sound like laughing chimes. You ask the wrong questions, seeker of knowledge. The song cannot be controlled, only conducted. It cannot be contained, only channeled. The child will learn these truths as she grows, if she is allowed to grow freely. And if she's not allowed to grow freely. The being's form darkened slightly. Then the song becomes discord, and discord in one so powerful. It gestured to the battle-scarred landscape around them. This would be nothing compared to what could happen. Ruby felt a chill of fear. Are you saying my daughter could be dangerous? All power can be dangerous if misused or suppressed. But this child's heart is pure. Her song comes from love, not fear. That is why we came to greet her rather than contain her. The being began to fade back toward the clouds. Remember this day, guardians of the Song Weaver. Many choices lie ahead. Choose with wisdom, for the music of the spheres itself hangs in the balance. As the alien presence departed, normal sound returned to the world. Soldiers began checking their equipment. Neighbors sat down heavily as the strain of maintaining their protective circle finally caught up with them, and the forest animals began to disperse peacefully, but the collectors were gone. Their vehicles and every trace of their presence had vanished as completely as if they had never been there. Where did they go? Jake wondered. Dr. Hendricks was studying her instruments. I'm not picking up any trace of them. It's like they were erased from reality. Colonel Morrison approached the house, her weapon holstered and her expression cautious but respectful. When Dr. Hendricks lowered the barrier to let her enter, the colonel looked directly at Willow. Hello, sweetheart, she said gently. I'm Sarah. I'm here to make sure you and your family stay safe. Willow studied the colonel with the same intense gaze she'd given Dr. Hendricks earlier. Sarah, nice? I hope so. I want to be. Okay. Willow smiled and went back to playing with her toys, apparently completely unaffected by the cosmic drama she had just orchestrated. Colonel Morrison turned to Ruby. Mrs. Chen, we need to discuss what happens next. What do you mean? What happened here today has changed everything. Your daughter is no longer just a child with unusual abilities. She's a strategic asset of unprecedented importance. Every government on Earth is going to want access to her. Ruby felt her protective instincts flare again. She's not an asset. She's my daughter. I understand. And I want to help you keep her safe while ensuring she can live as normal a life as possible. But we need to establish protocols. Dr. Hendricks interjected, Colonel, the child needs training. Today proved that her abilities are growing exponentially. Without proper guidance, without proper freedom, Ruby interrupted. She could become exactly what everyone fears. That being from the clouds made it clear. Trying to control her will make her dangerous. Marcus finally reached the house, exhausted from maintaining the psychic connection. He gathered Ruby and Willow into his arms, and for a moment, the glow around all three of them intensified. "I felt everything," he said quietly. "While we were connected, I could sense her thoughts, her emotions. She's scared, but she's also excited. She knows she's different, and she wants to understand what that means." Colonel Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "What if we tried a different approach? Instead of taking her to a facility, what if we brought the facility to her?" "What do you mean?" Ruby asked. "Set up a research station here in Pine Ridge. Let her grow up in her own home, with her own family, but with access to people who can help her understand her abilities. Voluntary cooperation instead of mandatory containment." Dr. Hendricks looked skeptical. "The security risks are manageable if we do this right. The child's emotional stability seems to be key to controlling her abilities. Keep her happy and loved, and she's not a threat to anyone." Ruby looked at Marcus, then at Willow, who was humming softly while making her stuffed animals dance. The toys were glowing gently, responding to her mood. What about school? Friends? A normal childhood? "We'll figure it out as we go. This is uncharted territory for all of us." Jake stepped forward. "Mrs. Chen, if it helps, I could request a permanent assignment here. Pine Ridge could use a full-time ranger, especially one who understands what your daughter is." Ruby felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way to protect Willow without sacrificing her childhood. But even as she began to consider the possibilities, she couldn't shake the feeling that today's events were just the beginning. The being from the clouds had spoken of choices that lay ahead, of a greater symphony that her daughter would somehow be part of. Outside, the forest was returning to normal, but Ruby knew their lives would never be the same. Willow was growing stronger by the hour, and with that strength would come new challenges, new threats, and new wonders that none of them could imagine. As if reading her thoughts, Willow looked up from her toys and smiled at her mother. "More adventures, Mama." Ruby kissed her daughter's forehead, tasting the faint flavor of starlight on her skin. Yes, baby girl, many more adventures. But first, they had to survive the ones that were coming next. 3 months later, Ruby stood in her kitchen making breakfast, watching through the window as Willow played in the backyard. The scene looked almost normal, a toddler chasing butterflies, laughing as she stumbled through the grass. But the butterflies were glowing softly, and the flowers she passed bloomed brighter in her wake. The research station that Colonel Morrison had promised was nearly invisible. Hidden sensors and monitoring equipment disguised as garden decorations, a small laboratory built into what looked like a tool shed, and Dr. Hendricks living in a cottage that appeared to be just another neighbor's house. Marcus came up behind Ruby and wrapped his arms around her waist. Their connection to Willow had never fully faded after that first day, and sometimes Ruby could feel her daughter's contentment like warm sunshine in her chest. "Jake's morning report," Marcus said, handing her a tablet. "All quiet on the supernatural front?" Ruby smiled. Jake had indeed requested permanent assignment to Pine Ridge, and his daily reports had become a comforting routine. Today's entry was typical. 2 deer visited the Chen backyard at 0700 hours. Subject shared her cereal with them. No unusual energy spikes detected. Recommend increasing organic milk budget. "She's learning control," Ruby observed, watching as Willow gently touched a wilted dandelion. Instead of the explosive growth they'd seen in those first weeks, the flower simply straightened and brightened naturally. Dr. Hendricks emerged from her cottage, carrying her morning coffee and a notebook. Over the past months, she had become less of a government scientist and more of a devoted teacher and protector. The transformation had surprised everyone, especially Dr. Hendricks herself. "Good morning, Willow," she called out. Willow looked up and waved enthusiastically. "Doctor!" "Sarah, look, butterfly friends." The butterflies around Willow began dancing in intricate patterns, their movements synchronized like a choreographed ballet. Dr. Hendricks pulled out her phone to record, not for government analysis anymore, but because she'd become genuinely enchanted by the daily wonders Willow created. "She's composing again," Dr. Hendricks said as she joined Ruby and Marcus in the kitchen. "The patterns the butterflies are making correspond to musical notation. If I'm reading it correctly, she's teaching them a new song." Ruby shook her head in amazement. "Sometimes I can't believe this is our life now." The doorbell rang, and Ruby went to answer it, already knowing who she'd find. Mrs. Patterson stood on the porch, holding a fresh-baked pie and wearing the gentle smile that had become constant since the day she'd been connected to Willow's protective network. "Brought apple cinnamon for our little songbird," Mrs. Patterson said. "And I wanted you to know, my arthritis hasn't bothered me once since that day. Whatever gift your daughter shared with us, it's still working." Ruby invited her in, and they joined the growing gathering in the kitchen. This had become another daily ritual. Neighbors stopping by with small gifts and updates, drawn by the sense of peace that seemed to radiate from Willow's presence. The Henderson family arrived next, followed by young Tom from the gas station and elderly Mr. Rodriguez from the farm. All of them bore the faint shimmer of connection to Willow, and all of them had experienced small miracles in the months since that first day. Healed injuries, renewed energy, a profound sense of purpose and belonging. "It's like she's created her own little community," Marcus observed quietly. Dr. Hendricks nodded. "The psychic network is stabilizing into something we've never seen before. Not just temporary connection, but permanent bonds that are actually improving the health and well-being of everyone involved." Through the window, they watched as Willow discovered something new in the garden. A small bird had fallen from its nest and lay motionless in the grass. Instead of the healing light they'd all come to expect, Willow simply sat down beside the bird and began humming very softly. The bird's eyes opened, and it chirped once before flying back to its nest. No dramatic glow, no supernatural fireworks, just gentle encouragement from one living thing to another. She's finding balance, Ruby realized, learning when to use her gift and when to simply be present. Colonel Morrison's voice came through the communication system hidden in their coffee maker. "Morning check-in, everyone. All readings normal. No unusual activity detected anywhere in the region." "All quiet here too, Colonel," Dr. Hendricks replied. Willow's learning to modulate her abilities naturally. "Good to hear. Any word from our cosmic friends?" Ruby looked up at the sky, where clouds drifted in perfectly normal patterns. Since that first contact, the beings from beyond had maintained a distant but watchful presence. Occasionally, Willow would point at empty air and wave, as if she could see them when no one else could. "They're still watching," Dr. Hendricks said, "but peacefully. I think they're waiting to see how she develops." Jake's truck pulled into the driveway, and Ruby could see him carrying something in a small carrier. When he came to the back door, his expression was both professional and slightly amused. "Mrs. Chen, we have a situation," he said formally. Then his professional mask cracked, and he grinned. "Someone's been leaving injured animals at the edge of the forest. Word's gotten out about Willow's gift, and it seems every creature within 50 miles knows where to come for help." He opened the carrier to reveal a young fox with a bandaged paw. This little guy was found this morning with a note tied to his leg. Ruby read the note aloud. "Please help Felix. He hurt his paw saving my chickens from a coyote. Sarah Miller, Oak Valley Farm." Willow had noticed Jake's arrival and came running over. When she saw the fox, her face lit up with joy and determination. "Felix hurt?" she asked seriously. Jake nodded. "Can you help him feel better?" Willow approached the carrier slowly, humming the gentle melody they'd all come to associate with her healing work. But instead of touching the fox directly, she simply sat nearby and continued humming while she played with her toys. The fox watched her curiously, then began to relax. After about 10 minutes, it stood up and tested its injured paw. Finding it pain-free, the little animal yipped happily and began playing along with Willow's toys. Indirect healing, Dr. Hendricks observed with fascination. She's learning to help without overwhelming the subject with direct energy transfer. Ruby felt a surge of pride. Her daughter wasn't just growing into her powers, she was becoming wise about how to use them. The morning continued with its usual mixture of the miraculous and the mundane. Willow healed the fox, taught the butterflies a new dance, helped Mrs. Patterson's roses bloom out of season, and had a very normal toddler tantrum when Ruby told her it was too early for ice cream. During the tantrum, not a single light bulb exploded, no electronics malfunctioned, and the only supernatural effect was that the houseplants seemed to droop slightly in sympathy. Even her negative emotions were becoming balanced and controlled. As the neighbors gradually dispersed and Willow settled down for her afternoon nap, Ruby found herself alone with Marcus for the first time in hours. They sat together on the back porch, watching their daughter sleep peacefully in her crib, surrounded by the gentle glow that now seemed as natural as breathing. "Do you ever miss the way things were before?" Marcus asked quietly. Ruby considered the question. "Sometimes. It was simpler when our biggest worry was whether she'd learned to say, 'please,' yet." She paused, watching a family of deer emerge from the forest to graze peacefully in their yard. "But then, I see what she's becoming, how much joy she brings to everyone around her, and I can't imagine wanting anything different." Marcus nodded. "She's going to change the world, isn't she?" "She already has," Ruby replied. "One song at a time." As if hearing her parents' conversation, Willow stirred in her sleep and murmured something that sounded like melody. The plants around the porch responded with a subtle brightening, and somewhere in the distance Ruby could hear the mother bear and her cub calling softly to each other in the forest. Ruby closed her eyes and let herself feel the network of connections that surrounded their home. The neighbors who'd become family, the animals who'd become guardians, the scientists who'd become friends, and the cosmic watchers who'd become protectors. All of them linked by the song of one extraordinary little girl who'd learned to heal the world with her voice. The future stretched ahead of them, full of unknowns and possibilities. There would be new challenges, new wonders, and new choices to make. But for now, in this moment, all was peaceful. Willow's soft humming drifted from the nursery, weaving through the afternoon air like visible love. The melody spoke of home and safety, of connections that transcended species and dimensions, of a universe where every living thing was part of one great, eternal song. Ruby smiled and hummed along, adding her voice to the symphony that had begun with a baby's compassion for an injured bear cub and grown to encompass the music of the spheres themselves. In the forest, the mother bear lifted her head and listened. In the sky, beings of crystallized sound paused in their cosmic dance. Around the world, other children with similar gifts felt a moment of perfect harmony and hope. And in a small house in Pine Ridge, a little girl named Willow Chen continued to sleep peacefully, dreaming of all the friends she had yet to meet and all the songs she had yet to sing. The story that had begun with one moment of innocent kindness had become something far greater, a testament to the power of love to transform fear into wonder, isolation into connection, and discord into the most beautiful music imaginable. As the sun set over Pine Ridge, painting the sky in shades of silver and gold that seemed to dance in rhythm with Willow's sleeping breaths, Ruby knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. All of them. Connected by song, strengthened by love, and guided by the unshakable belief that the most powerful force in any universe is the pure heart of a child who sees only friends where others see strangers. The end was really just the beginning. The end.